Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next edition of the K-Hub Driving Trade Excellence series, where we are pleased to welcome Dr. Badri Narayanan Gopalakrishnan, Fellow and former Head, Trade, Commerce and Strategic Economic Dialogue, NITI Aayog, Government of India, for a very interesting discussion on the impact of cross-border digital transmissions on MSMEs in India and the impact of the WTO E-commerce Moratorium. There has, of course, been a concern by some experts that this moratorium leads to the growth of digital monopolies, thereby impacting the trade competitiveness of such companies or new startups in developing nations, since there are already very successful and strong companies already which are operating in this space, and also deprives the governments of developing nations of much needed tax revenues. So it will be indeed interesting to know Dr. Badri Narayan's views on this topic. So good morning, sir. Welcome to the K-Hub series. Happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Very nice to be here. I'm excited.
Right, sir. So as I gave this brief context on this topic, so I would like you to first provide us with some background on this moratorium on customs duties and its significance in shaping global trade policies, as you have discussed in your research paper.
Yeah, thank you once again, Mr. Badri. It has been wonderful interacting with TPCI in general, and this is a great initiative. I'm very happy that we are having this conversation. Definitely, there are a wide range of debates and discussions going on regarding this topic. Let me go back in the history to the late 90s when there was a detailed deliberation discussion going on in the WTO about the digital transmissions, digital trade, e-commerce, and all these different topics. And of course, those days, these digital trade and transmissions were not that big of a deal, because it was relatively easy to get for the entire WTO membership to come to a consensus that in the spirit of promoting free trade in general, and also in the spirit of fostering policy certainty, policy stability across the world, and also to maintain what you can think of as status quo. There was a consensus arrived to ensure that no WTO member can impose custom duties. We should be very specific on this, custom duties on digital transmissions or electronic transmissions, to be specific. Of course, after that, there has been some debate, particularly after around a decade after the moratorium was first concluded, that this is not fair, like you mentioned, to developing countries and smaller industries and so on. There were many arguments there. Like one, like you rightly said, was about revenue raising capabilities of the developing countries, because when you say that you cannot impose certain custom duties, then it deprives countries of the ability to raise revenues. Secondly, the digital monopolies, and thirdly, the changing pace of trade, how a lot of trade in goods get converted into digitized trade in services and so on. And so there has been a lot of research done on this. I must say that many of these things are more concerns and worries and statements by some of the developing countries, including India, over time. And some analysis has been done to show how much revenue is lost and so on. But there has been a dearth of very in-depth economic research in this area. So, keeping this in mind, we did this particular research project. We had done this a similar kind of analytics few years ago, in which we looked at the potential impact of increasing these kind of digital tax on digital transmissions on various economies. And our central finding was that when you are raising increasing these tariffs, even ignoring the costs that may be involved in terms of the compliances that will be required and the implementation costs, even if you ignore that, these can really increase the costs of goods and services by a lot, and that would reduce the demand, which in effect would defeat the purpose of raising revenue. How can you raise revenue when your base shrinks? With a shrinking base, you're going to lose revenue on multiple other fronts. You're talking about, let's say, digital companies and so on. They are everywhere, including in India. So if you impose these digital taxes, it's going to affect them. But that is relatively well known. That was our previous study, and that is also quite well known. And in terms of the revenue losses and so on, there has been a lot of other work also. Like, for example, OECD has done some work recently, as recently as a couple of months ago in October. They came up with a report where they suggested that there are many other channels through which revenue can be raised through blanket taxes, which target both imports and domestic overall, and that can be, you always have the income taxes where you can target the income earned on digital transmissions and so on. Because when you go at transaction level, it becomes really difficult to target them, and it also encourages misreporting and so on. So people may, one good example is, for example, watching Netflix if there is a tax on digital transmissions, and if you're using VPN, you can actually use Netflix India sitting in the US, and then you can avoid all those taxes. So these kind of things can happen. There can be a lot of difficulties in terms of practical implementation. One country that has recently tried to begin some kind of compliance procedures is Indonesia, and they're already facing a lot of difficulties, both in terms of administration and in terms of backlash from the industry. I'm not talking about large companies, I'm talking about small industries. All the compliances are killing them. So I think this is the broad context in which we came to do this study, because there is enough evidence to show that this imposition of these taxes can affect the economy as a whole, and it can affect the larger companies. But there was very little evidence so far to think about the micro, small, and medium enterprises, and that is where we focused on in this study.
So your research paper highlights India's impressive growth in cross-border sales of digitally delivered services. Can you discuss the specific trends and sectors which are contributing to this growth from smaller Indian firms? How are they, benefiting from this?
Yeah. So the question is about the contribution of digital sector in Indian economy, right? And you are particularly asking about how micro, small, and medium enterprises are involved in it.
Yes, and how cross-border digital transmissions have been impacting Indian MSMEs.
Yeah, okay, that's a central question that we asked. So we had looked into this issue of the impact of digital transmissions, cross-border digital transmissions on MSMEs through the lens of their value added, their employment, and also their labor productivity. So these are three different variables we are looking at. And we did a very detailed survey data from NSSO, official national statistics. And we also used the IO table, input-output table, to compute the digital transmissions. Now, the channels through which the digital transmissions, cross-border digital transmissions, can help these variables in MSMEs are manifold. The first is through greater efficiency because of these let's say, for example, looking at apps like Facebook or Google, even Google Map, Google Pay, and many of these other international apps which have servers outside India. Maybe even some of the apps could be. I'm just giving you the example of most commonly used apps, but there are also very specific apps depending on what kind of companies you are working on. And all these apps, every day they are involved with a lot of cross-border digital transmissions. And you can clearly see that over time, these MSMEs are becoming more productive because of the use of these digital transmissions, particularly the cross-border ones. The cross-border digital transmissions particularly can be more helpful because these are, if an MSME is going to use a foreign cross-border digital transmission, that means it is really cost-saving for them, it's really efficiency enhancing for them. And that, in turn, is also leading to competition domestically, and there are domestic customized apps that are coming up, which can compete with these cross-border apps. So now this cost reduction and efficiency enhancement is the main reason why the MSMEs are able to increase their productivity, and thereby they can increase their value added, and hence they can also increase employment. And here, one important feature, which is kind of an answer to the dilemma faced by policymakers generally, is that generally productivity and activity increases, there are high chances that employment can fall. But here is a situation where we see both increase, both the labor productivity and employment, both are increasing. So I think that is noteworthy finding that we got. And mainly, if you take even COVID, for example, I mean, I can easily talk about cost reduction and efficiency improvement, but that may sound very abstract. But if you come to COVID, during COVID-19 crisis, we had lot of small restaurants and shops. They were able to thrive or even survive because of the digital technologies. So these digital technologies, many of which involve a lot of cross-border digital transmissions. So they have helped the MSMEs to survive. So in our study, we took a very quantitative turn at this and collected all the data from the official data sources and made some assumptions to arrive at the digital transmission, the cross-border digital transmissions using the input-output table. And then we standard and state-of-the-art methods in econometrics and policy research literature. So that is how we worked on this paper, and I think I summarized broadly what are the findings and how the digital transmissions cross-border are helping the local MSMEs.
Right. And you have also discussed, a significant growth in India's share of global estimated digital trade. And could you elaborate on how its performance compares to other OECD member states? And apparently, it is even better than China in this regard. In its share of global estimated digital trade, its performance is better than China. Could you elaborate on that, please?
That's a great question, Mr. Virat. Thank you for asking this question. There are three different angles in which I would think about India's rise as a digital player, which is far ahead of other countries. The first thing is India as an IT service exporter, and that is very well known. Already India has established its role as a global leader in IT services. So that is very well known. And here we think of companies like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, and so on. The second aspect is the new age unicorns, the startups that are focused on developing digital products rather than digital consulting services that used to be the forte of TCS, Wipro, etc. And these are companies like Swiggy, Zomato, and so on. And the third is the what I might call as democratization of digital services. How many of these digital services reached rural areas and vulnerable sections of the population, which in turn led to huge increase in the use of digital transactions and so on. So these are the three major aspects here, and definitely, like you rightly said, India is far ahead of many other countries, particularly in terms of the digital transactions. India is a very number one at a very far ahead kind of base. On the other two aspects, definitely as an exporter of services and also as a home of digital unicorns, India is again a major player. And now I just want to deviate slightly from your second question and go back to your first question. And there is a connection here. And the connection is that in our study, we only focus on the cross-border digital transmissions that are imports, basically imports coming into India, because we particularly wanted to see the impact of these imports on the domestic MSMEs. However, what we have not looked into the study, which is, one reason we didn't look into this is because it's almost quite well acknowledged and well known as a stylized fact, and that is the role of India's digital exports, IT exports. India is not only a player that imports digital services, but exports it a lot. And there also MSMEs are involved. There are many times you have vendors for these large IT companies as small companies. And if you look at the electronic components, electronic products ecosystem, which is closely related to the digital transmissions ecosystem, there also you see a lot of MSMEs contributing. So we have not even explored that aspect in our research, but definitely that is something to also take note of. So with all these different things in terms of exports, in terms of domestic production expansion of unicorns, and in terms of consumption, that is digital transactions, India is far ahead of many other countries, including the developed OECD countries.
My next question is regarding your assertion in the study that there is a positive, correlation between digitally delivered imports and the gross value added of MSMEs. So, what have you specifically found out from your study on this aspect?
Yeah, in terms of so we as kind of a measure of diagnostics, before we get into the detailed econometric analysis, we wanted to look at various correlation matrices. We wanted to see to what extent the cross-border digital transmissions, basically the digital imports, service imports, are correlated with MSMEs, value-added employment, their productivity, and so on. So we found a very strong positive correlation in all of them, actually, not just the gross value added, but also the others. And that was kind of alluding to the previous point that I was mentioning, that the reason why these digital transmissions are expected to, forget about future, but in the past, they have very positively contributed to gross value added and employment and labor productivity. And correlation analysis is kind of the first step going into the detailed econometric analysis. And of course, just because there is correlation, we cannot say that cross-border digital transmissions are the only reason why GVA is increasing or labor productivity is increasing and so on. But we can definitely say that they are positively correlated. They both are positively related. Now, that led us to the detailed econometric analysis, which I can explain later, because we want to capture the simultaneity, like how different variables affect each other. And there we can net out the effect of these cross-border digital transmissions on MSME variables.
Right, sir. And finally, I wanted to ask you, because your research paper also mentions insights from various stakeholders in the ecosystem. So, what was the perspectives of this issue that they shared with you? The key perspectives regarding, if there is a implementation of tariffs or taxes or digital transmissions, what will be the impact on them?
Yeah, this is a very important point, Viratji, and I would like to clearly discuss this. We were astonished to see that many of these MSMEs, we are talking about the mom and pop stores, the petty shops as we call them, the small shops, brick and mortar shops, and many of the other small players whom we talked to, they are not even aware of this whole debate going on, for obvious reasons, because there has not been enough stakeholder discussion done to take a position in this regard. So I think that is very important for us. So we have to consult when you're talking about digital transmissions. We're not only talking about the digital companies, we're also talking about a wide range of micro, small, and medium enterprises. Because when we asked them about the digital transmissions, they didn't know anything. So we had to educate them a little bit. We had to tell them that this is what is happening in WTO and so on. So they said that they're not much bothered about it. They're not much aware of it. They don't know much about it. But they made one point clear, and that is anything that can increase the cost of production in these MSMEs, that can be catastrophic for them because they are running on very low margins. So if there is anything that is going to increase the taxes, increase the transaction costs or something, that is going to affect them very badly. So that is a clear message we got from the MSMEs. So if the aim of these digital taxes are to raise revenue, that, in my opinion, cannot be at the cost of these MSMEs who are in a very delicate position. They have been, if you also look into our analysis, we also see that MSMEs have been declining over time. Their output and employment and productivity, everything has been declining over time with a small increase recently, but generally they have been declining. So if this has been in a way a saving grace for them, the digital transmission. So now if there is any effort to make it costly and impose taxes on it, that's going to affect them. Then when we spoke to some of the government stakeholders, they felt that some of the points that you mentioned earlier, that we need some policy space for the domestic digital players and so on. However, they also felt that this cannot happen at the cost of the MSMEs. We need to proactively help the domestic digital companies to develop, but that cannot be done through tariffs. So because the implementation costs are very high, how are we going to track? I already discussed this point before. How are we going to track and classify something as digital transmission and then tax it and so on? So it's going to be very difficult. And we also spoke to some industry associations, which also kind of echoed the opinions of the MSMEs that I already discussed about. So in general, they are apathetic. In general, they are not very concerned about the moratorium. But they did say in general terms that if anything is going to increase their cost, whether it is for small players or large players, that is going to be affecting them badly, and they won't support it. We also spoke to an MSME think tank, and they said that there has to be greater outreach of the government and industry associations and so on to help the MSMEs make the best use of digital technologies, and the cross-border digital transmission should be promoted, because that is how the MSMEs can get the benefit of the best of the world. And they also talked about micro MNCs, micro small and medium enterprises, which can also function as MNCs using these cross-border digital transmissions. So there are a lot of opportunities for MSMEs to become global using the digital transmissions. So these are some major points that emerged out of our discussion with various stakeholders.
Right. So, sir, I think that ends a very, very interesting discussion, because this is a very important topic on which there's a lot of discussion happening across the stakeholders. And although we have been talking about the impact of the moratorium on our taxation revenues, and also on whether our own companies will be able to come up in the face of such digital monopolies. But your research undoubtedly shares some very interesting views, and opens up the discussion much further. And I'm sure that there is a lot we'll be hearing on this topic in the coming days, because it is actually, you rightly pointed out that when these rules were set, the digital journey of the world, or the global digital journey, was very nascent. But right now it is, I think we are only hearing about digitization and trade in the coming years. So it is definitely the future. And thank you so much, sir, for your insights on this very, very important topic.
Thank you very much, Raji, and I really appreciate this discussion, and I deeply also appreciate and congratulate you and your team at TPCA for doing this very important task of supporting debate and conversations and discussions on these very essential topics. So the industry as a whole benefits and the country as a whole benefits. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.